What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. And this one, I'm going to go over each of the first 10 rounds and go over the player that I think is the riskiest draft pick to make in that round. I just put out a video going over what I believe are the safest draft picks in each round, so this one will be the follow-up on that. I'll try and touch on which players I'm still drafting despite that risk and sort of explain how I feel like there's sort of a bit of a turning point in drafts where you get to a little bit later in the draft and it makes more sense to take more risks. Just where earlier on in the drafts, I think that there's a lot of you can really hurt your team by drafting a player that busts early on. So I find that I tend to avoid taking those high risk players earlier on in drafts than being more risk or more willing to take on risks later on. So really enjoy making these videos. I hope you guys are liking them too. Up next, I'll be doing some more auction stuff. I'll go into some auction draft values. I'll be analyzing ADP versus the auction draft values of players, and then showing which players lie above or below the expected cost of that player based off of their ADP. And then you guys can use that on whatever platform you're on to sort of decide which players have a unique value, especially in auction drafts. So yeah, really fun doing all this stuff for you guys. If you like the video, please do take the time to give it a like at the end of the video. If this is your first time, please do subscribe. If you like what you got here, you can get more videos. We're putting out at least one every other day. So it's been a lot of fun. And yeah, with that, let's get into the first round. So starting us off in round one, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is actually Cooper Kupp. Obviously, he has the upside to finish as the wide receiver one this season. He's been the wide receiver one just 2 years ago. Last season, he was wide receiver one in points per game, but we saw him get banged up last season, and we also saw Matthew Stafford get banged up last season. We've seen Matthew Stafford honestly consider retirement this offseason. He is coming back for sure, but this entire Rams squad could be a team that sort of hangs it up around midseason. If Stafford gets hurt, we know that Sean McVay has sort of got one foot out the door. Stafford's got a foot out the door. Cooper Kupp could easily be asking to get traded at the end of this season. So there's just the chance that this is a truly lost season for the Rams, just like last season was. So if Matthew Stafford goes down, or if Kupp goes down himself, it's going to be really tough for Cooper Kupp to return that round one value. And I think that given the high risk that you are taking with a round one pick here, if Cooper Kupp does bust, you're going to have a really hard time being a contender if you draft him. So I tend to find myself avoiding him unless he slips a little bit in ADP. I just have a hard time spending a first round pick on a player that I think has a pretty high chance of being a complete bust due to injury. Moving into round two, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is Derrick Henry. There's just a really long history of running backs sort of falling off a cliff around their age 28 season. This will be the age 29 season for Derrick Henry. And obviously, Derrick Henry is a bit of a different animal. He's clearly an elite running back. He really hasn't shown too many signs of falling off, but we saw him get banged up just 2 years ago. He's been given a ton of work over the last 5, 6 years, honestly, and they do finally have a potentially competent backup in Tyjae Spears, so maybe they sort of wean Derrick Henry out a little bit. I'm not saying Derrick Henry's not going to be a complete touch hog, but he could get 20 touches a game instead of 23 or 24. And also, there's just an opportunity here for this Titans team to be really bad. They were 7-3 last season and proceeded to lose their final 7 games. They have potentially a rookie quarterback at some point this season. They got Will Levis. They also have Malik Willis, who looked really bad last season. They're going to start the season trying to be a competitive team. They've got Ryan Tannehill. They just signed DeAndre Hopkins earlier today. So they're going to be a team that's trying to win football games, but it's also more than likely that they end up not being able to be that Jaguars for this division. If the Titans start slow, it could be a team. They could be a team that are sellers around the trade deadline. You could see Derrick Henry getting moved mid-season. And on top of that, injury is still a concern. Like I said, he's getting up there in age. We've seen him have that foot injury, and it's just there's a lot of risk associated with taking Derrick Henry. Obviously, he can finish as the running back one, so I don't hate taking him at the end of the second round just because of that upside. But I think that in general, you just need to understand that he could be a player that really does easily bust just because of his age and all the question marks surrounding his team. Moving us into round three, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is honestly Calvin Ridley. Obviously, it's been almost 3 years since we've seen him put up truly difference-making numbers. He only played 5 games in 2021. He was suspended for the whole 2022 season. And on top of that, there's no true guarantee that he's even the number one target on this offense. We saw Christian Kirk perform really admirably last season in that role. Zay Jones is a good player. Evan Ingram got a lot of targets. Travis Etienne's a capable pass catcher as well. So there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed in this Jaguars offense. And we just don't know exactly how good Calvin Ridley's going to be. He's entering his age 29 season, so he isn't really that young. I know it's his 5th year in the league, but he was a really old rookie coming into the league as well. He was 24 when he left Alabama, so it's certainly possible that Calvin Ridley is just getting up there in age as well, of just sort of being rusty. I would honestly expect him to start slow this season, sort of be a guy that maybe if you want to trade for, you could trade for around the midseason point as he gets more comfortable in the offense. But I just have a hard time really drafting Calvin Ridley. I think that he does have top 10 wide receiver upside because he is a really talented player. We've seen him put up a top 5 finish at the position before, and I think Trevor Lawrence is going to take a step forward this season, but there's also an opportunity here where he's the number 2 or number 3 receiver on this offense even. I'm projecting him to be the number 1 wide receiver, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than the way people are treating it. I think Christian Kirk's going to be just right up there with him. So I think there's a really wide range of outcomes for for Calvin Ridley here, and I think there is a world where he's just a true bust. So I don't find myself drafting much of him, especially in round 3, and I just don't think I would recommend that you do either. Moving into round 4, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is going to be Christian Watson. I personally have him ranked significantly below ADP, and he's obviously shown flashes last season. He put up a stretch where he scored like 7 touchdowns in 5 games, but on this Packers offense could be truly awful this season. They were really not great last year, and they're in all likelihood taking a downgrade at the quarterback position, going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. On top of that, Christian Watson's just going to need to get a far larger target share than he did last season to be relevant. He only caught 41 passes in 14 games last season. He's sort of put up numbers that are really similar to what we've seen Gabe Davis do earlier in his career, where he put up a couple spike weeks that were really hyper efficient, guys that caught 3 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown and made everyone really excited. And I'm not saying Christian Watson is Gabe Davis. He might be just a much better player than Gabe Davis is, but I think it's reasonable to assume that in general this offense is going to be less efficient going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. That's certainly going to hurt Christian Watson because he's not going to be given those true volume numbers. We've also seen Romeo Doubs get a lot of love in camp so far this season. So I don't even think it's out of the realm of possibility that Romeo Doubs finishes the number 1 wide receiver in terms of targets on this offense. So you're really just banking on really high efficiency out of Christian Watson, and it's tough to be that efficient on what is probably going to be an inefficient offense in general. You're going to need him to put up a lot of touchdowns, and I don't think there's going to be that many to go around in this Packers offense. So I personally find myself not drafting any Christian Watson. I think that there's just a world where he ends up being effectively a boom or bust flex play, and you're drafting him to be your wide receiver too if you're drafting him here. So I find myself pretty much out on Christian Watson just because of how wide his range of outcomes is, but I don't even really think he's got top 15 wide receiver upside just because I don't think this offense is going to be good enough. Moving into round 5, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is going to be Justin Fields. Obviously, we see that Justin Fields does have top 3 upside at the quarterback position, but he's going to need to make a massive leap in the passing game, or he's just going to need to absolutely shatter the quarterback rushing record this season for him to actually pay off at his ADP. I currently have him ranked the quarterback 13, or that's how he comes out after all of my projections. And in those projections, I am projecting him to break the rushing record for a quarterback in a season. So despite doing that, he's still not a quarterback 1 in my rankings. He would just truly need to take a huge step forward in the passing game as well. And it's possible that DJ Moore helps him do that, but this is going to be a really run-heavy team. They're going to try and win games by running the ball, being an explosive team that takes the ball or takes the top off the defense on play action. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of volume for Justin Fields, especially in the passing game. So you're going to need him to be a really high-end runner. Obviously, he can be, but on top of that, we've seen injury concerns for him last season. We saw several games last year where during the game he was limping around, he had hamstring issues. We've seen him take a lot of hits, and I'm not exactly confident that we can see Justin Fields hold up for a 17-game season if he's utilized in the running game the way he was for that stretch last season. And I just haven't seen enough from him from a passing standpoint to believe that he's going to take that step forward. If you go take a look at stuff last season, I was super high on Jalen Hurts. I did project him to be my number 1 quarterback last season, and he ended up finishing that. So I think I'm pretty good at identifying which quarterback's going to be able to take that step forward. And I just don't really see that with Justin Fields. I really thought I'd be able to, but the more I look at him, the more I just don't see a truly elite pocket passer. I don't think he's got a very accurate deep ball, and he's just really going to need to be a really fluky runner this season for him to pay off this ADP. So that range of outcomes is just way too wide. I find myself taking guys like Justin Herbert or even Lamar Jackson in this range ahead of Justin Fields. In round 6, I think the riskiest draft pick here is going to be Cam Akers. He's obviously shown flashes of being a really talented running back in the NFL. We've seen him put up a really quality stretch prior to tearing his Achilles. And then last season, at the end of last season, we saw him really be a really useful fantasy running back. That was with Baker Mayfield on what was just a really awful offense. So there's a world that exists where the Rams offense is a lot better than it was last season, and Cam Akers is their lead guy. There's really not a whole lot of competition for touches in this backfield. We've got Cam Akers, then we've got Kyren Williams, Sony Michel, and Zach Evans. Really nobody there that's going to demand touches. I think that Kyren Williams is the best of the other 3, and he's more of just a scat back. So Cam Akers is going to get the lion's share of the touches in this offense, and this offense should be better than it was last season. So a world exists where Cam Akers does finish as a top 15 running back, but they also haven't been very committal towards Cam Akers. They were really this close to trading him. They just couldn't find anybody that wanted him last season. They have said good things about him this offseason, saying that he's going to be a big part of their offense, but just because they're saying good things about him now doesn't mean they truly mean them. And the Rams as a team have just a really wide range of outcomes. They could be a team, like I said earlier, with Cooper Kupp that's just packing it in week 8, and maybe they want to get Kyren Williams more looks because he's a younger player and they want to move on from Cam Akers, or maybe this is a team that surprises people. They end up around 500 in a playoff hunt, and then Cam Akers could truly be a difference maker for you on your fantasy team. So I think there's a really wide range of outcomes for Cam Akers, and this is around the point in the draft where I get more willing to take some risks. So I don't hate the draft cap or the draft cost of taking Cam Akers here. I'm willing to do it in round 6. I'd prefer to draft him in round 7 if he could slip a little bit, but I think he's worth taking a look at here. I think the upside's there. I do have him ranked a little bit below ADP, but the upside's pretty undeniable here, and I think that he is actually a good enough player that if this Rams offense is good, he does offer some significant upside. Moving into round 7, this was honestly pretty much the easiest one for me to pick here. It's KADARIUS TONEY. I think that he's shown a ton of potential when he's on the field. We've seen him put up an over 200-yard receiving game. He's been super explosive with the ball in his hands. He's really athletic in open space, and he's just honestly a really good player when he's out there, but that's the problem, is that he just really can't stay out there. He's missed several games every single year of his career so far, and oftentimes he's on limited snaps when he does play. But we've seen Patrick Mahomes say really good things about him this offseason, say he can be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. We've seen that Andy Reid does want to utilize him more than they did last season. And we actually saw KADARIUS TONEY be pretty fantasy relevant in spurts last season after getting to the Chiefs, and that was after being traded midseason and not being fully integrated into the offense. So if he can stay healthy, I think there's a real world out there where he finishes as the wide receiver 1 on this team, finishes top 20 at the position, just an absolute steal in round 7. So despite the fact that there is a world where he's just a complete bust, he gets hurt, can't stay on the field, and ends up being worthless, I don't find myself too much shine away from him in round 7. I think the upside's really there, and I think he's a good enough player on this offense that, assuming the depth chart stays as it is, which looks like it will, I think KADARIUS TONEY is probably going to finish as the wide receiver 1 in games that he's healthy here, and he's going to be a guy that you really can play on a weekly basis. So I like drafting KADARIUS TONEY here. There's a ton of upside, and obviously there's a very wide range of outcomes with him, especially from a health standpoint. But if he's on the field, he's going to be great, so I don't mind drafting him here at all. Moving into round 8, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is going to be Elijah Moore. We've seen Elijah Moore prove, especially in his rookie season, that he is a talented wide receiver. We've seen him be really elite in terms of from a route running perspective. We've seen Matt Harmon over at Reception Perception just glow about Elijah Moore. He really thinks he's a talented player, and I generally trust his judgment on that. But he really just fell out of favor with the New York Jets last season. He couldn't get on the field. They kicked him to the curb this offseason. Now he's been traded to the Cleveland Browns. So if he can reestablish himself as the number 2 target in this offense behind Amari Cooper, and Deshaun Watson can return to form as that top 5, 10 quarterback in the NFL, then Elijah Moore is going to be an absolute steal here. He's a really good player. The Browns have said that they want to be a more pass-heavy offense, and we've seen that Deshaun Watson can support multiple wide receivers in the past. So if all that happens, Elijah Moore does have top 24 upside at the wide receiver position, but it's also possible that maybe he falls out of favor with the Browns too. If he fell out of favor with the Jets, it's reasonable to assume that there's some sort of character issues, some sort of practice issues going on with Elijah Moore that keep him off the field here. It's also possible that Watson just isn't good anymore, and if that's the case, then you're going to be looking at what could be the number 2 or maybe the number 3 target in this offense, depending upon where you rank David Njoku for what could be a really bad offense. So Elijah Moore could be anywhere from worthless to a top 24 wide receiver this season. I don't find myself drafting that much of him just because I'm worried that he's not going to be able to find himself in favor with the Browns. I actually really like David Njoku as well, so I sort of project Elijah Moore to be the number 3 target in this offense, and the number 3 target for a better Deshaun Watson than we got last season, but not truly the elite Deshaun Watson we've seen in the past. Just isn't going to be good enough to cut it for me. But like I said, there's a really wide range of outcomes for him. If you want to bet on the talent, I don't have any problem with that. Moving into round 9, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is Anthony Richardson. I think this one's pretty obvious here. He's got all of the athleticism in the world, but he's just a really raw prospect. We really didn't even know if he was really a good college quarterback. He showed a lot of flashes. He's shown that he can throw a really nice deep ball, but for every really nice throw Anthony Richardson made at Florida, he made 1 or 2 really bad ones as well. So if he could truly emerge as an elite rushing quarterback, and maybe he surprises us and takes a step forward at the quarterback position a little earlier than we thought. We know the Colts do have the former offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, so they've shown very clearly that they can work with Jalen Hurts and other mobile quarterbacks. So it's possible that this offense just is really well run. They've got good enough weapons between Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor to make the ball move down the field. If this offense is a little bit better than I'm projecting, and if Anthony Richardson can just be a really explosive runner, then he's got that top 10 upside at the quarterback position. But I think it's probably more likely that he starts really slowly. We see him just really be a raw talent and not really be able to move the ball very well. We see this Colts team really struggle at the start of the season, and then maybe Anthony Richardson picks it up over the course of the season. But I think that in general, I'd rather just wait on Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to be a guy that, like I said, he's probably going to start really slowly. He'll probably get better as the season progresses, but he could be a guy that really ends up on waivers some point in the season. And at that point, I'd be willing to pick him up and hold him for later on in the year. So I don't find myself drafting Anthony Richardson. I don't think he really has that top 5 upside at the position, just because there are guys like Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson that are mobile and are a little bit more proven passers. So even though I'm not huge on Justin Fields, I still think I obviously have to have him ranked ahead of Anthony Richardson. And if I'm not really drafting Justin Fields, then I don't really believe in Anthony Richardson either. But like I said, if you want to bet on the talent, he's obviously a truly elite specimen from an athletic standpoint. He could just be a guy that breaks the mold. He could rush for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns this season. And if he does that, then obviously he's going to be a league-winning draft pick in the 9th round. So I have no problem drafting him. I just don't really see him hitting that ceiling, but it's definitely there. And finally, in round 10, I think the riskiest draft pick you can make here is going to be Rashaad Penny. He was given a 1-year prove-it deal by the Eagles in the offseason, and he's proven that he's a really talented player when he's on the field. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry throughout his career, and the Eagles have an elite offensive line, so it's reasonable to assume that that efficiency is only going to continue, if not improve, this season if he's on the field. And we did see the Eagles trade for DeAndre Swift during the NFL draft. DeAndre Swift's another very talented running back as well, but the Eagles really haven't invested very heavily in any of their running backs. They gave Rashaad Penny a 1-year prove-it deal. They traded a 4th-round draft pick for DeAndre Swift. They've got, I think Kenny Gainwell was a 4th-round pick as well, and they've still got Boston Scott on the roster. So there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of non-committal from the Eagles in terms of who their running back is going to be this season. The way I projected, I would have Rashaad Penny getting 1st and 2nd down work and also getting that goal line work, and then we're going to see Kenneth Gainwell and DeAndre Swift sprinkled in on 3rd downs. I think that in general, Rashaad Penny is the most talented runner on this team, so I think he really does have an opportunity to finish as a high-end running back 2. We saw Miles Sanders finish as a running back 1 last season in this offense, and honestly, Rashaad Penny's been more efficient when he stays on the field, but if Penny can't stay on the field, he's going to be a guy that obviously he's not going to play for you. He could be banged up. He could also lose the job to DeAndre Swift, who I do think is a really talented player. So Rashaad Penny's got a really wide range of outcomes here. He could be a guy that finishes anywhere from top 10 at the position maybe to being just completely worthless. I don't have any problem drafting Rashaad Penny here. He's being drafted in the 10th round. To me, that's a perfect draft spot for him. If he's a bust, if he gets hurt, you have no problem. Your team is not really going to be hurting. You can just cut him and move on. But he could be a true league winner if he really just gets a stranglehold on that 1st and 2nd down and goal line work. And if that happens, he's going to be a guy that really just helps you on your fantasy team this year. So that'll do it for the riskiest player in each round draft video. I'll maybe touch this one up again when we get a month from now, further into August, and sort of review each of these players, see if there's been any changes in terms of who I view as the riskiest draft picks there. Up next, I'll be doing an auction draft values video. I'll go over which players are going for cheaper in terms of their pre-draft value compared to their ADP on each platform, and I'll sort of suggest which guys are uniquely valuable in auction formats where the pre-draft value is just a little bit skewed compared to where their ADP is. I found that this is a really helpful way for me to help myself get a leg up against my league mates in auction drafts. It's just really fun to do that analysis as well, so that'll be available for free on the website as well after I do that. So like I said, keep your eyes out for that. I really do enjoy making these videos. If you like this video, which I hope you did because you made it this far, please do take a minute to like the video. It really helps with the algorithm. If it's your first time here, thanks for stopping by. I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel if you liked it and want more content like this. You can click the notification bell so you get more notifications when videos come out. We're doing 4 to 5 videos a week, it seems like now, and it's been a lot of fun. We're really going to get more into it as the off season progresses. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.